But if there was a good coach, and Pelosi is the best coach, and if you're an NFL team and you're deep into the season and you're 5-10, and your starting quarterback, has let you down, you're out of the playoffs, and you are 5-10, and you really don't have a path to making the playoffs, what's the right thing to do? Go to the bench, to the second string for your quarterback. Pull that quarterback into the game. See if they're going to be able to be your lead quarterback for the next season. I know that's a little fatalistic way to look at this election. If you're the general manager of the Democratic team, it's time to pull in your second string quarterback and see if that quarterback can run with the ball, because it doesn't look like that first string is going to make it.
All you timeless children with your predictions and flashbacks, trying to get ahead. What makes you think I can see you? What makes you think I believe you? Dreams, psychopath. Have you heard me lately? We were stepping up way late. Shot, that's from the past. All the dreams were flying, all the thoughts were dying. Heard, from the past.
Is it time to replace Biden? I mean, that's the big mover and shaker in the markets. Even here on this Wednesday, Biden election odds shifting precipitously. Jeff, the reason why those odds may be shifting, because Biden appears to be the problem. The problem is the big guy at the top of the ticket. You pulled up this great chart earlier today, and you shared it with me so we could put these slides together. If you look at the polling in the swing states for Senate, Democrats are on top by fairly significant margins, outside the margins of error in the case of many of these polls. But when you look to the presidential race, it's red across the screen. Biden looks like he is going to lose the election. Democrats actually have a chance of retaining the Senate here. Biden is the problem at the top of the ticket for Democrats right now. And the betting markets today, upon hearing the news that Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries, the Senate Majority Leader, the House Minority Leader, respectively, would be causing or calling for President Biden to delay his nomination, the virtual roll call. Prediction betting odds today took a dunk, Jeff.
They did.
And they've been dunking in a fashion that you have been telling me to trade them in for a long time, which is to say that anytime Biden betting odds for the nomination get into that 60, 70 cent range, sell them. Why is that working for you?
Well, it's worked because of the sheer volatility. I think that's a good perspective as to how this show came to be anyways. The show is options trading, and the tastylive approach that is discussed daily on the network and that you do such a great job of is really the show. Prediction markets are the minor leagues. They're binary markets. They trade between $0 and $1, or literally between 1 cent and 99 cents. You don't have to wait for the binary outcome. You can trade in and out, and they're relatively liquid markets. On predicted.org, the presidential market, the presidential outcome, the Democratic nominee market, which is what we're talking about now, that has tens of millions of shares traded in that particular market. And I am an active political prediction market trader. I've been doing it for 4 years now, and been doing it profitably, I might even add, which is a lot of fun. And to get to your question, this is a good market because there's been so much volatility. The straight outcome markets about who's going to win the presidential election, there's less variability and less trading opportunities. But the two markets that, and we can talk about them both today, that enjoyed lots of volatility and a lot of trading opportunities have been Dem nominee and Trump VP, which just resolved, of course, this past week. But let's look at the market you just brought up and asked about. Joe Biden today up or down 19 cents. And you're right, it's because of the rumblings going on between Hakeem Jeffries and Schumer that are kind of, having their conversations right now. Axios and Politico are both reporting that Nancy Pelosi has been very active, having calls,
Yes.
having conferences. There was a Zoom call that Politico reported on a couple days ago that came right before the assassination attempt. Otherwise, it would have been the dominant story because apparently, in the words of Politico's reporting, it was a disaster as much as the debate was for Biden. He was mumbling, he was incoherent at times, and there were 50 congressional representatives on that call, and it didn't go well. And as a result of that, the drumbeat has continued on the inside to push Biden out. I've been short Biden for a year and a half now. So those who go back and look at old episodes of the prediction trade and the political trade, the one certainty I said well over a year and a half ago was that Biden would not be the presidential nominee for the Democrats. Now that wager is in far more question than the certainty I had a year and a half ago. But to your point, there's been lots of opportunities to trade in and out of that, and I have. Today, being short Biden has been a really good trade because of what you just brought your attention to. And that's the point here, is that these are markets that are liquid that you can trade. If you go back a space to the tile for this market, it will show its amount of shares traded. And this is predicted.org, a legal marketplace under exemptive relief from the CFTC to be able to legally trade in election outcomes. And if you click on markets at the top there in the upper navigation.
And Jeff, if I just may do a quick little plug here, if you are on the website as well, you go down to featured podcasts, you'll be able to go and find the prediction trade here on predicted.org. So be sure to check it out if you're wanting to listen to it again. But yes, you wanted to go over here to markets at the top side here.
Markets, and they show you and here it is. The first market is Democratic nominee, has 49 million, almost 50 million shares have been traded in this particular market. So they're certainly liquid. And that's what the opportunity is to trade in and out of these markets. So again, we don't talk about who we want to prevail in any of these elections. We look for expected value and betting opportunities and mispriced markets. And because so many people, when it comes to politics, choose to invest or trade or wager or speculate with their heart rather than their head, these are considered broadly to be very, very inefficient markets and don't enjoy the efficiency and the liquidity of the broader capital markets. And that's been the focus of guests we've had on throughout the show. So let me put this back on you. I've been short Biden for a year and a half, traded in and out of this market easily a dozen times since then, and I'll continue to be short Biden. I'll tell you why I think he's destined not to be on the ticket, but we can get to that in a moment. But what's your take on this market? Where do you see value in that particular Democratic presidential nominee market?
The presidential nominee market, to me, is one that we should be looking to fade Biden in. It feels like because of the assassination attempt this weekend, and thankfully President Trump survived it, this would be very bad for the country if it went another way. There is a lot of pressure behind the scenes, not just from conversations that I know that are going on, publicly reported. Pelosi, the fact that she's involved should be a very significant sign that this is a market that may ultimately resolve itself at 0 cents. Will Biden be the nominee? Why do I say that? For all your faults and disagreements with Pelosi as someone who may not be on your side of the aisle, she's really good at math. She likes to count her votes, and she's been making those calls on a district-by-district basis in recent days. So I think that this is a really live contract, and I think it's a live contract for the timing component here too, Jeff. You and I were talking about the prediction markets and how they're relatable to options. You have to view the Democratic nominee trade right now, for those out there, kind of like a short-dated option, because when you get to August 7th, that is the deadline by which President Biden needs to have his name on the Ohio ballot, or any Democratic nominee's name needs to be on the Ohio ballot. If the Dems change their nominee after August 7th, then Joe Biden's name will be on the ballot for president, regardless of who is actually running. So we talk about the volatility here in some of these markets right now. Something like who will win the presidency in 2024, that's like a longer dated option. It's like 45 days, 60 days, or in this case, we're talking about an event that's not going to come to pass for nearly 4 months, so closer to 120 days to expiration. This, who will be the presidential nominee, it's more like having an option that expires in 14 days. And so these are more likely to move around a lot more on a day-to-day basis, particularly over the next 2 weeks, than something like who's going to be the president, Trump or whatever generic Democrat there is out there, Jeff. So for traders looking for something that's moving, something that's going to be headline responsive on a day-to-day basis, I think it has to be the Democrat nominee, at least in the next 2 weeks. All eyes there.
And then that's why you're the rightful heir to the host spot of this show, because the options tie-in, I think, is really that's really proper. That's why there's an opportunity in this market, because of it is a shorter outcome. This needs to be resolved quickly, and the path to resolution, in my mind, is you continue to hear in the press and the pundits saying, "Well, this is Biden's decision," but that's just not the way politics works. If Pelosi and Schumer and Jeffries want a different outcome. They will get a different outcome. I mean, there's a lot of different ways you can convince Biden. First of all, the delegates can make their own decision as well, even though they're Biden's delegates. But, there's presidential library funding. That's a little carrot you can dangle. And I'd like to think of it, if there was a good coach, and Pelosi is the best coach, or let's say general manager, let's say she's the equivalent of the general manager on an NFL team. And if you're an NFL team and you're deep into the season and you're 5-10 and your starting quarterback, has let you down, you're out of the playoffs, and you are 5-10 and you really don't have a path to making the playoffs, what's the right thing to do? Go to the bench, to the second string for your quarterback. Pull that quarterback into the game. See if they're going to be able to be your lead quarterback for the next season. I know that's a little fatalistic way to look at this election. According to Nate Silver, as of today, Trump looks like a 67% shoo-in to win. There's a lot of time between now and November, and there's clearly going to be 1 or 2 October surprises. But if you're the general manager of the Democratic team, it's time to pull in your second string quarterback and see if that quarterback can run with the ball, because it doesn't look like that first string is going to make it. I mean, that's the way I call it. That's the way I would think this plays out. And, maybe Kamala Harris turns out to be Brock Purdy. Maybe she comes off the bench and, that game against the Dolphins in the December of that year where he came back after Garoppolo went out and it was a 33-17 victory. Maybe that happens with Harris. And if it doesn't happen, it clears off the bench, it clears off the ticket for the next general election. And I'm pretty certain that's how this is going to play out. But that's what the prediction market's about. What's your take on that?
I'm very much in agreement. And I think that actually puts a lot of opportunity into one of the more thinly traded contracts here in the market right now, which is, will Harris be on the 2024 Democratic ticket? I don't like using the term they're selling dollars for 90 cents here, but just working through the mechanics of this, either Biden stays the nominee and Harris is the vice president, or you need to hand off the presidency to someone to give them the power of incumbency. And that's Harris here. Even if Biden doesn't resign as president, but says he's going to step aside as the Democratic nominee, he's going to clear the path for someone who can mythologize him, someone who could effectively run as, I'm taking the baton to keep this administration and its successes going. And you can only choose people in the cabinet for that. And I don't think you can really skip over the vice president in this scenario. So if I'm looking at, is Harris going to be on the 2024 Democratic ticket? I see that's only trading at 90 cents right now. I think that's a discount here. That does not seem feasible at all, because to your point, whoever runs on the Democratic ticket in 2024 is burnt. If they beat Trump, they're going to be the incumbent for going into 2028, or they're going to be termed out. If they lose to Trump, Biden is obviously not going to run again in the future. I can't imagine that he's going to be the Democratic nominee in 2028. And Harris may have been the sacrificial lamb, so that people like a Gretchen Whitmer or a Wes Moore or a Josh Shapiro or an Andy Bashir, they don't have that political baggage of losing a presidential election and having had to maybe give up their gubernatorial standing in the country. So Harris on the 2024 ticket, that to me is a very easy trade, and I will be executing that.
That's exactly the way I say it. Yeah, we're in absolute agreement in that. You have a natural knack for this, because I know we've been talking offline about the, let's look at another market. I'm pulling up the, or if you can, pull up the VP market, although it's actually, that's resolved, so you won't be able to bring it up. But let's talk about it. So the Trump VP market was a fantastic market to trade, because there were so many candidates. There was a lot of optionality on it. I think I told you I was long Rubio from 8 cents. I had that position for a long time. I thought Rubio would have been a smart pick. It's interesting. Trump's pick of Vance is clearly somebody who's playing the long game. He has a lot of confidence in his election outcome, and he's playing a long game. If he was playing the short game and was concerned about the election outcome, he would have picked a Youngkins to sway Virginia, or a Rubio to sway Hispanics in Nevada, or a Scott to help with the minority vote, Tim Scott. But he he's playing the long game. He's kind of assuming, because Vance doesn't add anything to the ticket. And I made the mistake of giving Trump a little bit more credit for being perhaps rational or less confident about his selection. But fortunately with Rubio, I bought it at 8 cents. Last week, there was a rally in Miami, and that's when the betting markets really thought Rubio was going to be announced. It went up to 23 cents. I sold out a third of my position at that point to cover. So that way I had my skin out of the game and was just working with profits. And I saw that all evaporate when Vance was picked. But I do know another host of this show had the right pick. The question is, did you actually make that wager?
No, I didn't. And I talked with you about this, and Vic Jones put me on the spot on last week's Price of Truth, who's going to be the Republican nominee. And I said that I thought it was going to be Vance because of some of the headlines that we were seeing. More importantly, forget the Miami snub. It was the fact that the day after the RNC approved the language changes in their party platform, that Vance came out and issued comments on abortion that effectively mirrored what Trump had been saying. And he was the first of the VP candidates to do that. Yeah. So he was clearly willing to stick his neck out on an issue that is divisive nationally within the party and line up right behind the president. So that was a pretty early tell. But I agree with you. I think that this was the confidence pick. And so going into it, having been under the belief system that he would choose someone like Vance, I've been operating under the bias that this is going to be bad for bonds. A Republican trifecta means more spending. And so bonds probably have a little bit of drag on them. And when we get the pick coming out the other day, when we have the news over the weekend, stocks up, bonds down.
Right.
Unfortunately, I don't really capitalize on it. I can't capitalize on it because bonds are moving a few ticks. Yet in the prediction market, you have Vance, who a few weeks ago was trading at 12 cents, jumps up to 65 or so at a point last week, and obviously settles at 100.
Sure.
Even if I had been able to get in at 65 cents, right, making 35 cents over 65, you're talking about a rate of return that's a little over 50% on invested capital in the span of a few days. Yeah. That's way more than I would have been able to, or that I did pull out of the bond market around this particular point of view. And so this goes to show that these markets, they offer a way to express something that you can't necessarily express with a perfect position elsewhere, because there's always a number of other factors in play. Nothing's going to be a perfect direct hedge or a perfect corollary. And so this has been a particular wake-up call. I had an idea. I tried to articulate it through the financial markets. And while I did so, it was not nearly as lucrative or potentially profitable had I done so in on Predicted, for example, or any of the other betting markets, depending upon where you reside. Which is to say, Jeff, I wanted to talk through some of these other betting markets. This is our first episode. Sure. A lot of people who are trading this may not know the difference between a Predicted and a Kalshi, and what's increasingly popular, a Poly market, which you mentioned him before, Nate Silver of 538 fame. He announced yesterday that he's joining Poly market. Poly market is a crypto-based prediction market, and unfortunately, it's not really allowed to be used in the United States. So we're not necessarily trading on it, but talk to me about Poly market, Kalshi, and Predicted.
So Poly market is denominated in crypto, and because of the transaction fees and the settlement fees, it makes it a little bit more cumbersome and eliminates some arbitrage opportunities. But it was founded in 2020. There's been well over 400 million in trading transaction volume in that market since its inception. And they raised over 70 million in venture capital. So this is a real market, and it gets a lot of ink. So does Predicted. Predicted is now quoted in the press as frequently as 538. And interestingly enough, Nate Silver, who founded 538, to your point, just wandered over to Poly market. So I think you're going to be seeing a lot more of that. So it's a real market, and between Poly market and Betfair in the UK, which has had legal betting on presidential outcomes in the US for decades now, those are the two largest markets for legal political prediction market betting on election outcomes. But there's also Kalshi that you mentioned. Kalshi, Kalshi, is the Turkish word for everything, because Tariq Mansour, who was one of the guests on the prediction trade in the past, the founder of that market, as John Phillips, the founder of Predicted, was a guest on our podcast in the past as well. When they founded this market, the idea was that you'd be able to bet on anything, cultural events, political outcomes. Now, oddly enough, Kalshi is prohibited legally from betting on prediction or for making markets on political election outcomes. So they have some political bets, like currently at Kalshi.com, you can see the the wager. I see you brought it up here. So you can see on Kalshi, you can bet on Joe Biden's 538 approval rating, kind of an over-under wager, and you can bet on whether Jerome Powell is going to be retained or not. So there are political wagers that can be made, but they're not election outcomes. And by the way, those are it's worth noting, by the way, I know we only have a couple of minutes left, but I want to give a nod to some of the people who've been on the show in the past. And with a minute to go, we can kind of talk about who you might be able to see in the future. We've had prognosticators, punters, which is the British word for bettors, pollsters like Robert Cahaley, one of our best performing podcasts of all time, Anthony Scaramucci, James Carville, Dylan Radigan, political activist and progressive activist Rachel Bidikofer, politicians. Governor Rod Blagojevich was on a couple times. James Altucher was on Harry Crane, who is a Rutgers University professor, who is one of the academics who have studied prediction markets more than anyone. And he's really shown in white papers empirically that prediction markets have been more accurate for predicting political outcomes than the polling markets, than the polls. And that's based on the wisdom of the crowd. You have a crowdsourced prediction based on outcomes. And going back full circle, the prediction market had J.D. Vance. If I went with the favorite, even up 3 days before Trump named him VP, he was still only selling at 33 cents. And that's a nice 3-to-1 payout. You would have had a 3-to-1 payout had you pulled the trigger on that. So prediction markets are something that everybody should look at if they're trying to quantify the probability of any outcome. And look forward to doing this with you once a week going forward. It's going to be airing on YouTube as well. Look at the YouTube tastylive trending channel, where we'll air all the prediction market shows. And thanks for doing this. I appreciate it.